The Great Hall of the Galactic Medical Council was larger than any human city stadium. The ceiling rose so high that the top was hidden in soft blue mist, and giant crystal lights floated above the meeting floor, casting a cold silver glow across the long curved tables where the leaders of every known intelligent species sat in silence. In the center of the room, a massive hollow display shimmered into life, showing the moving image of a human body, the heart inside the chest thumping in a steady rhythm, the lungs pulling in air and pushing it out again, muscles flexing under layers of skin that looked pale compared to most alien colors. And on one arm, there was a deep wound that closed before their very eyes, knitting together like it had never been there at all. The alien medics stared in disbelief, some leaning forward, some blinking their multi-layered eyelids again and again, as if their vision was faulty. For a long moment, there was no sound except the faint hum of the hollow. Projectors. Then a voice broke the stillness, sharp and filled with doubt. It came from a tall insectoid with gold-plated armor along its body. It asked, how is this possible? No known life form heals at such a speed. This creature should be in shock. Yet the image showed the human moving its hand, flexing fingers, looking calm and breathing steady. Another voice, low and slow like moving stone, rumbled from the back, suggesting it could be a trick, some kind of machine, or an illusion to impress the council. But the lead medic, a being made entirely of shimmering crystal plates joined at thin seams of light, spoke with a tone that cut through the air. This is no trick. The scans are genuine. This creature was injured less than 1 minute before the recording began, and now it shows almost no sign of harm. The council chamber was filled with low whispers now, sounds in many tongues, clicks, hums, and trills that blended into a strange living background noise. Each representative spoke to the ones beside them, exchanging theories and fears, but one shared feeling ran through them all: confusion. On their charts and in their records, biology followed rules. Cells had limits, organs failed when damaged, and pain was a signal to stop. Yet here was a creature that ignored those rules and seemed to write its own. In the upper gallery, rows of young alien apprentices watched in awe, their eyes and other sensory organs locked on the strange mammal on the screen, their teachers quietly telling them to remember this day, for it might mark the beginning of something the galaxy had not seen before. The crystalline lead medic raised one long arm, its facets catching the silver light, and the hall went silent again. There's a danger in what we see here, the medic said, not a danger from weapons or armies, but from something deeper, a danger to the balance of knowledge itself. If one species can survive damage and adapt faster than all others, then it can outlast them in any environment, in war, in disaster, even in peace. And the others will always be at a disadvantage, the insectoid with gold armor shifted uneasily, asking what the council planned to do. The medic paused, then answered that they must first understand the human fully, study it in every way, and discover whether this strange biology is rare or common among its kind. The screen changed, showing more recordings, humans running through burning debris with smoke filling their lungs. Yet they emerged alive and breathing hard but steady, humans climbing frozen cliffs with bare hands while winds cut at their skin. Yet they reached the top and smiled at each other, humans swimming through dark, icy water to save others trapped beneath, their bodies shaking from the cold but not collapsing. Each clip made the alien crowd lean forward more, some with fascination, others with a growing sense of fear. In one scene, a human soldier was caught in a blast that should have ended any normal life. Yet minutes later, that same soldier dragged 2 injured comrades to safety, limping but alive. From the shadows at the edge of the hall, a small group of deep space traders whispered about their past encounters with humans. One told of a crew whose ship lost all heating in deep vacuum near a gas giant, and the human crew members wrapped themselves in thin emergency foil and kept working for hours while others had to be placed in stasis pods. Another trader spoke of a human who repaired a reactor leak while breathing air so toxic it should have stopped the heart in seconds. Yet the human lived and even made jokes while working. These were not tales of strength alone. They were tales of something else, something harder to measure, the will to keep moving when logic says you should stop. The lead medic asked for the official record to note that this was the first formal session dedicated to the biology of the species known as human, and that the council considered it a matter of high importance. The council seal burned into the corner of the hollow screen, marking the moment in history. The insectoid leaned forward and suggested they summon a live human to the council for direct testing. A murmur of agreement and disagreement spread around the hall. Some species argued it would be dangerous to bring such a resilient creature into the heart of galactic politics. Others claimed it was the only way to truly understand what they were dealing with. In the far seat of the hall, a reptilian representative named Drac Vor sat still, his silver scales reflecting the lights in small glints. He had met humans before, though never in such a formal setting. And he remembered something the others seemed to overlook. It was not only that humans could survive, it was that they could adapt faster than reason allowed. He recalled a mining world where humans arrived as laborers, and within weeks they were working in heat and dust that had taken his own species generations to tolerate. Drac Vor tapped his claws on the table in thought, the sound echoing faintly, his eyes fixed on the human on the screen, and he wondered if the council truly understood what they were about to uncover. The lead medic spoke once more, their voice ringing like thin chimes. We must learn the truth before it is too late. If we do not, the galaxy may find itself unprepared for what these creatures can do. The chamber fell into a heavy quiet, the kind that comes when many minds are thinking the same unspoken thought. Somewhere out there on a small blue and green world was a species that healed faster, endured longer, and adapted better than anything the galaxy had ever known. And the question that hung in the cold air was simple: how long before the rest of the galaxy learned just how far a human could go? Drac Vor did not wait for the council to debate for weeks, as they usually did. Instead, he sent a private message to the lead medic offering to travel to the human homeworld at once. The medic agreed with surprising speed, perhaps knowing that too much discussion would only lead to arguments and delays. And so Drac Vor boarded a long-range research ship the very next day. The vessel cut through slip space like a silver spear. The view outside, shifting from swirling blue light to the dark calm of normal space as it emerged near a small yellow star with a cluster of inhabited worlds. At the center of this system was the blue-green sphere called Earth, its surface covered in wide oceans and thick green continents, clouds swirling above like white rivers in the sky. Drac Vor had visited many worlds, but none that looked so alive from orbit. He had expected human cities to be huge metal hives or scattered wastelands, but instead he saw a strange balance. Clusters of tall buildings surrounded by fields and forests, bright lights of industry shining beside dark, untouched mountains. The ship descended through thick atmosphere and landed in a quiet region far from the largest cities. A human research group was already waiting. They wore thick coats and smiled with an openness that made Drac Vor uneasy. Their leader was a man named Eli, his eyes bright but calm, his voice warm even in the cold air. "Welcome to Earth," he said. "We heard you have questions about what we are." Drac Vor began his work immediately. He carried scanners, thermal readers, and a set of diagnostic tools older than some planets he had visited. Eli agreed to every test without hesitation. They started with simple endurance runs. Eli jogged across frozen ground for hours without rest, his breath steady, his skin flushed but not failing. The scanners recorded heart patterns that should have signaled exhaustion long before he stopped, yet he only slowed when Drac Vor insisted. Next they moved to controlled temperature trials, first in a chamber filled with icy wind, then in one heated like a desert furnace. Eli's body adjusted faster than the instruments could track, his core temperature rising and falling, yet always returning to balance. Drac Vor noted each result with a growing sense of disbelief. Late one night, Drac Vor awoke to faint noise outside the small research station. He followed it and found Eli waist-deep in a half-frozen river, pulling out tangled nets that had trapped a local animal. The water was so cold that even the air above it stung Drac Vor's scaled face. Yet Eli laughed as he freed the creature and guided it to the shore. Later scans showed his muscles had been strained, his skin chilled nearly to the danger point. But there was no lasting damage, Drac Vor recorded in his notes that humans not only survive conditions lethal to most life, but continue to act and make choices as if the danger were nothing unusual. Over the next days, Vor tested reactions to low oxygen, placing Eli in a sealed room with air so thin most species would lose consciousness in minutes. Eli lasted far longer, adapting his breathing until it slowed and deepened, his body using every particle of oxygen with perfect efficiency. Vor shook his head in private. This was no accident of evolution. This felt like deliberate design, like the work of engineers who had mixed the strengths of many worlds into one being. Yet the humans seemed unaware of any such origin. When Vor asked how humans learned to live through so much pain and stress, Eli only shrugged and said, "We get used to it, that is all." The council back in the capital world demanded regular updates. Each time Vor sent data, they responded with disbelief or suspicion. One member suggested Eli might be a rare mutant and not representative of his species. So Vor requested more volunteers. Soon he was testing men and women of many ages, farmers, soldiers, pilots, even a musician. Every one of them showed the same strange traits: fast healing, extreme adaptability, high pain tolerance, and the same calm ability to function in conditions that would cripple others. The more data he collected, the more uneasy he felt. For if even an average human could survive in such ways, then what could the strongest of them do? One afternoon, Vor decided to push the limits further. With Eli's agreement, he simulated a shipboard emergency, sealing him in a chamber filled with smoke and toxic fumes while alarms blared. Most species would have collapsed in moments. Eli coughed, his eyes watering. But he stayed upright, searching for an exit, his body processing the poison at a rate that baffled the scanners. When the doors finally opened, he stepped out, still breathing on his own, his voice rough but steady as he said, "That was not so bad." Vor looked at him in silence, realizing that the stories he had heard from traders about human resilience were not exaggerations, but barely the surface of the truth. Even stranger was the way humans recovered emotionally. On another world, Vor had seen soldiers of many species haunted for years after surviving a disaster. Yet here on Earth he met human veterans who had faced battles, storms, and loss. And though their eyes showed pain, they still laughed and helped others without hesitation. It was as if their minds had the same survival code as their bodies. Refusing to surrender to despair for long, Vor began to understand why some species saw humans as dangerous. Their biology made them hard to kill, but their spirit made them even harder to stop. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains and the air grew cold, Eli joined Vor outside the station. They stood in silence for a while, watching the fading light. Then Eli spoke. "You came here thinking we were strange, maybe even a threat, but we're just doing what life does. We survive." Vor turned to face him, the silver in his scales reflecting the orange glow. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "but most life survives within limits. You seem to have none." Eli smiled faintly at that, but said nothing more. The wind carried the scent of pine and snow as the stars began to show, and Vor felt for the first time that his mission was not just about studying another species. It was about discovering how far life itself could be pushed before it reached the edge. When he finally sent his latest report to the council, he did not soften his words. Humans are unlike any species we know. Their biology ignores the limits written in a life by nature. They adapt at speeds that make prediction impossible. They endure conditions that erase other life. And they do so not as exceptions, but as a rule. If there is logic in their design, it is a logic older and wider than this galaxy. The council's reply came in a single line: "Continue observation, but prepare for containment." Vor read it twice, wondering if they understood that containment might be the one thing humans would never accept. The council ordered that a controlled trial be made far from Earth, so the results could not be influenced by human surroundings. They chose a station on a frozen moon orbiting the gas giant Varellus. The place was remote, cold, and empty, perfect for studying a species under stress. Vor informed Eli of the plan, and the human agreed without hesitation. His only request was that they allow him to bring nothing but standard gear and clothing, no special protection. Vor could not tell if this was confidence or arrogance. The ship carried them through slip space, and the stars blurred in a silver haze until the moon appeared ahead. a white sphere with dark canyons carved by ancient ice flows. The station itself was buried under layers of rock and metal to shield it from the brutal winds outside. When the airlock opened, they were met by a mixed crew of alien scientists and engineers, each one briefed on the unusual nature of their new subject. They watched Eli closely as he stepped into the main hall. The cold inside the station was still harsher than most species could tolerate without heated suits, but the human only pulled his jacket tighter and smiled. They began with simple acclimation tests, lowering the temperature further each day, tracking how long Eli could function without external heat. The readings baffled them. His body temperature dipped, but then stabilized, as if his entire system had recalibrated to the new environment. They had seen some species adapt to extreme cold, but never this fast, and never without specialized evolution for such a climate. The next phase involved gravity shifts. The station's artificial systems allowed them to change pull from low to crushingly high. Eli stumbled at first when they increased it to twice Earth's gravity, but within hours he was moving normally, lifting and carrying equipment as if the change were minor. The reptilian technician on duty muttered to Drac, that his own people trained for months to handle such gravity without injury. Yet the human's muscles and bones seemed to reinforce themselves. Almost in real time, on the second day, they pushed the limit further, tripling the gravity. Eli's breath came heavier, sweat formed on his skin, but he still finished the assigned tasks. He collapsed onto a bench afterward, grinning like a soldier after a long march, and asked if that was the best they could do. Radiation exposure tests were next. Using controlled levels that would sicken most life in hours, Eli's cells reacted strangely, flushing damaged tissue and regenerating new cells at a speed the scanner struggled to record. Drakvor stood beside the control console, his claw tapping against the metal edge as he read the numbers. It was becoming clear that the human body treated threats not as fixed dangers, but as challenges to overcome, adjusting itself as quickly as the threat appeared. By the end of the first week, the station crew stopped whispering doubts and began whispering fears. Some thought the council might have underestimated the scale of what they were dealing with. One night during the third week, a system alarm blared through the halls. A meteor fragment had pierced one of the outer layers of the station, causing a power loss in a remote sector. The emergency team scrambled to seal off the breach, but Eli was already moving, pulling on a thin suit and running through the half-lit corridors. Drakvor followed, but could not match his speed. By the time they reached the damaged sector, Eli had clamped a temporary seal over the hole and rerouted power lines. His hands were bleeding from sharp metal edges, but he waved off help, insisting they had more important repairs to make before the cold reached deeper into the station. The engineers looked at him in stunned silence, not because of the injury, but because he was still moving like nothing had happened. Drakvor wrote in his private log that night, "Humans possess more than physical endurance. They have an instinct to act in crisis faster than thought, ignoring injury and focusing on solutions. This makes them dangerous not only because they survive, but because they adapt their behavior as quickly as their bodies adapt their biology. Such a combination is rare, and in the wrong hands it could change the balance of power in the galaxy." The log was encrypted, but even Drakvor felt uneasy writing it, as if the words themselves could one day be used as evidence in a trial. The station commander suggested they try environmental extremes beyond cold and gravity, so they took Eli outside in a pressure suit designed for shorter alien bodies. The fit was awkward, but he shrugged it on without complaint. Outside the station, the wind roared like a living thing, carrying shards of ice that cut through the air at deadly speed. The temperature was low enough to freeze unprotected flesh in seconds. Eli trudged forward against the storm, his movements steady, his breathing calm over the comm channel. After 20 minutes, most species would have been showing signs of failure, even with the suit. Yet Eli returned inside and asked how far the ice canyon stretched. The crew exchanged looks and decided not to answer. As the days turned into a month, Drakvor noticed something subtle. Eli was not just enduring the environment, he was growing stronger in it, his reflexes faster, his breathing more efficient. Even his skin seemed less affected by the cold. This was adaptation on a scale the Council had never documented, and it was happening in real time. Drakvor began to wonder if prolonged exposure to multiple hostile environments might eventually make a human capable of thriving anywhere in the galaxy. The thought was both fascinating and unsettling. The final test was one Vor had argued against, but the Council had insisted. They created a simulated hull breach in deep space, pulling air from the chamber to mimic sudden vacuum exposure. The goal was to see how long Eli could function before collapse. The air rushed out, alarms blared, an icy emptiness filled the space. Eli moved slowly but deliberately toward the emergency release panel, his body fighting against the lack of oxygen, his vision narrowing, yet his hand found the panel and triggered the seal before darkness claimed him. When they pulled him back into the medical bay, he was coughing and shaking, but within minutes he was breathing normally, his eyes clear, and he laughed hoarsely as if the entire thing had been some kind of strange game. Vor reported the results to the Council in detail, omitting none of the numbers. Humans recover from vacuum exposure faster than some species recover from mild illness. He wrote, "They will not be easy to contain." The Council sent no reply this time, only a silent acknowledgement. Vor stared at the screen for a long moment before shutting it down. Somewhere in his mind a question had taken root. If a single human could survive all this with nothing but time and will, what could many humans accomplish together in places the galaxy thought impossible to live? The Council's silence stretched for many days after Vor's last report. During that time, the frozen moon station continued to run its tests. Yet the scientists began to notice something they had not planned for. Eli was no longer just adapting to the environment. The environment itself seemed to be adapting to him. The cold winds outside felt less cutting when he worked in the open. The crushing gravity chambers no longer slowed in the way they had before. His body carried itself with an ease that spoke of complete mastery over conditions designed to break most life. The station log showed a steady rise in his physical performance, while the stress markers in his biology fell lower and lower. The change was so fast it unnerved the crew. Some began to request reassignment to other stations, saying in hushed tones that they felt as if they were watching evolution happen in front of them. Vor kept his focus on the data, but deep in his mind, a question grew heavier. What if humans were never meant to remain on only one world? What if their biology was built to conquer every kind of environment in the galaxy? One evening, while the frozen canyons outside glowed under the faint light of the gas giant above, he sat in his quarters and accessed the deep records of the galactic archives. His clearance level was high enough to open files most researchers would never see. The archives contained fragments of exploration log from before the Council itself was formed, records written by species long extinct. In those fragments, he found scattered mentions of a mammalian biped that could adapt to hostile worlds faster than any known life. These records were thousands of years old and gave no clear origin, only warnings that such beings should be monitored at all times. The descriptions in those records matched humans too well to be coincidence. Yet the dates made no sense. The human species on Earth was far younger according to Council anthropology, unless the archives were wrong or the humans had been somewhere else before. Vor searched deeper, bypassing encryption layers with codes he had gathered over decades of quiet service, until he found a cluster of star charts marked with a faded sigil not used by any current civilization. The charts showed trade routes that no longer existed, linking worlds spread across multiple spiral arms, and on each world a single notation repeated, successful adaptation confirmed. The name of the species was erased in every file, but the details were too familiar: upright posture, omnivorous diet, rapid healing, resistance to extremes of heat and cold, and the ability to survive with minimal tools in almost any terrain. The next morning, Vor decided to run a different kind of test, one that would not require Council permission. He approached Eli in the station workshop where the human was repairing a damaged power relay with bare hands despite the live current. Vor asked if he would be willing to try a field exercise on a different planet. Eli agreed without hesitation, saying he was tired of the cold moon anyway. The transport ship they used was small and unmarked. Avoiding official channels, they landed on a nearby volcanic world where the ground steamed underfoot and the air shimmered with heat. Vor wore full protective gear, yet still felt the weight of the heat pressing against him. Eli stepped out in only a light suit and scanned the horizon like a soldier checking terrain. Within an hour, he was moving freely across black rock fields, drinking from a boiling mineral spring and laughing at the taste. They stayed there for 2 days, collecting samples and recording data. Eli's body adjusted to the heat as easily as it had to the cold. His hydration level stabilized, his skin developed a faint protective layer of hardened cells, and his breathing slowed as if conserving energy. Drakvor recorded every detail while the thought grew louder in his mind. This was not evolution shaped by one world. This was something broader, more deliberate, as if humans had been built to carry the memory of many planets in their genes. On the second night, they camped near a lava flow, the red light flickering across the rocks, and Eli asked why the council cared so much about what made humans different. Drakvor hesitated before answering, telling him about the ancient records, the mention of a species that appeared again and again across forgotten trade routes, always thriving, always adapting, until they vanished from the archives without reason. Eli listened quietly, then said maybe the reason we adapt is because we never know what will happen next, so we just get ready for everything. Drakvor considered this, but knew it was more than instinct. The data was too precise, the match with ancient descriptions too close. When they returned to the frozen moon station, the crew noticed a strange change in Eli, not in his appearance, but in the way he moved. As if the heat of the volcanic world had not left him, his steps lighter, his endurance even greater. Drakvor realized that each environment was leaving something behind in the human body, a permanent layer of adaptation that did not fade when he left the place. That night, Drakvor sent another encrypted report, this time not to the council, but to a single old contact on the galactic fringe, someone who had once been an explorer before the council began controlling all major travel. He included the ancient star charts and his findings, asking if the contact had ever seen a species like this before. Days passed before a reply came. A short message containing only coordinates to a world far beyond the official borders, along with a warning. If you go there, be ready to see the truth you may not want. Drakvor saved the message but told no one, not even Eli. For now, his focus was still on the experiments, though the shape of the truth was beginning to form in his mind like a shadow growing closer. The council finally broke their silence, sending new orders that Eli was to be transferred to the capital world for deeper study under controlled security. Drakvor read the message twice, feeling the weight of what it meant. The capital was not a research place, but a stage, and once humans were placed there under the watchful eyes of politics, there would be no way to keep them from becoming a matter of fear and debate across the galaxy. Eli seemed unfazed when told of the move, simply saying, "It would be nice to see more of the galaxy." But Drakvor knew the council's interest had shifted from curiosity to caution, and once that happened, no species remained free of their grasp. As the transport prepared for departure, Drakvor stood by the viewing port and watched the gas giant turn slowly below the moon. The station lights glowing faint against the endless dark. Somewhere in those ancient star maps lay a piece of history the council had tried to erase. And somewhere in Eli's blood was the proof that history could not be erased forever. The thought filled Drakvor not only with questions, but with the first hint of fear. Because if humans truly were what the old record suggested, then the galaxy had not yet seen the full measure of what they could do. News traveled fast in the galaxy, even when the council tried to keep it contained. Whispers began to slip through the trade routes carried by merchant crews and deep space haulers. The first stories sounded like exaggerations told in dim cantinas, tales of a strange mammal from a small blue world that could walk through freezing storms without slowing, that could work in toxic air and keep breathing when others fell. Some listeners laughed it off, while others leaned closer to hear more. The details grew with each telling, until the name human began to carry a tone of mystery in markets and docking bays. No one knew exactly where the humans had come from, but everyone knew someone who claimed to have seen one. On the capital world, the council kept official silence, yet private debates grew heated. Some members argued that humans were simply another hardy species like the rock dwellers of Morith or the sand tribes of Uroth. Others said the data showed something far beyond normal adaptation, that the resilience of humans made them unpredictable and therefore dangerous. Behind closed-door security officials asked for contingency plans. What if humans spread beyond their current world? What if they began to settle in border systems or in disputed territories where other species struggled to live? What if their adaptability allowed them to thrive where even machines failed? Such questions carried a quiet fear that no one wanted to name out loud. Eli arrived on the Capitol under heavy watch, not in chains, but escorted by guards whose eyes followed his every move. The city rose in shining towers over a wide plain, the air clean and mild thanks to the controlled climate systems. Yet Eli's eyes kept drifting upward, as if judging the skies for weather that would never come. Drakvor stayed close, guiding him through the crowded transport halls where citizens of dozens of species moved past without knowing who he was, but in certain corners. The whispers followed them, traders pointing and murmuring, engineers pausing their work to take in a sight of the tall stranger walking with unhurried steps. The rumor had reached here too. The council arranged a series of new trials, this time with full political oversight. The testing rooms were larger, lined with recording devices, and the observers included not just scientists but military strategists and economic planners. Eli seemed unconcerned by the stares. He moved through endurance drills and reaction tests with the same calm determination. One session involved working in a sealed chamber filled with air pressure, so high it made the walls groan. Other species would have been slowed and bent under the weight, but Eli moved as if he carried nothing more than a heavy pack. His heartbeat rose and then steadied. The observers exchanged looks and took notes without speaking. Outside the council chambers, the public began to argue in open forums. Some saw humans as a possible hope for frontier colonies struggling against hostile worlds. Others feared that humans could replace them in their own territories if resources grew scarce. Holoscreens carried opinion debates with images of Eli displayed behind the speakers, his face calm and unreadable, while captions repeated the phrase, "the adaptable species." Trade guilds wondered aloud whether humans could work in mining fields where no one else lasted more than a season. Military leaders considered the use of humans in dangerous missions where normal troops failed. Every such thought carried the seed of both opportunity and threat. Drakvor noticed the change in tone whenever officials spoke of humans. It was no longer pure curiosity. It was calculation, the same kind that preceded trade wars or strategic alliances. He kept this to himself while continuing to monitor Eli. Yet he could see that the human was beginning to sense the shift as well. One night in their assigned quarters, Eli asked if the council thought of him as a guest or as property. Drakvor did not answer directly. Instead, he said that the council was deciding how to classify humans in the larger order of the galaxy. Eli gave a slow nod, his eyes narrowing as if filing the answer away for later. Rumors began to take on sharper edges. A mining crew on the far rim claimed a human laborer had saved them from a collapse by holding up a support beam long enough for everyone to escape. A medical transport in the Nebula Lanes reported that a human passenger survived a hull breach without a suit for nearly a full minute until rescue. Each story spread faster than the last, the details changing, but the theme always the same. Humans endure, humans adapt, humans survive. In some places this was spoken with admiration, in others with quiet dread. Drakvor received private messages from colleagues warning him to be careful. Some hinted that the council might decide to restrict human movement before the stories grew too wild. Inside the council itself, the divisions deepened. One faction pushed for formal alliance with Earth, offering technology in exchange for human labor and military support. Another faction argued for containment, suggesting that Earth be kept under strict watch and its people discouraged from leaving in large numbers. The debates grew heated, old rivalries between species coloring the arguments. In the center of it all, Eli continued to move through tests and interviews, speaking politely but giving little away. His calm became part of the legend, a face that did not flinch in the face of scrutiny. Drakvor found himself caught between roles. As a scientist, he wanted more data, to push the limits of what Eli could endure. As a witness, he began to feel a protective instinct, aware that the galaxy was looking at humans as tools or threats rather than as people. One afternoon, he intercepted a transmission not meant for him. It was a military proposal to begin training select humans in advanced tactics for deployment in high-risk zones. The tone of the message was cold and efficient, listing survival rates and cost savings. Nowhere did it mention consent. Vor deleted the copy from his device, but the words stayed with him. One evening, they were taken to a reception in one of the high towers, a place of polished stone floors and slow-moving light sculptures. The guests were diplomats, officers, and corporate leaders. Eli moved among them like a quiet shadow, answering questions with simple words, never revealing more than necessary. Vor watched as different groups sized him up, some with open interest, others with hidden concern. It was clear that the adaptable species had become more than a rumor here. It had become a potential player in the great game of power that shaped the galaxy, and games like that rarely ended gently for newcomers. As the night ended and they returned to their quarters, Vor looked out over the lights of the city stretching to the horizon. He thought of the frozen moon, the volcanic world, the ancient records, and the coordinates he still carried from the old explorer. Somewhere far beyond these towers lay the truth about where humans had been before and why they were what they were. And here in the heart of the capital, the whispers were turning into decisions that could shape the fate of Earth for generations. The thought made him grip the rail tighter, as if holding on to something solid before the storm began. The city never slept. Its lights stretched out to the far horizon like a sea of fire, and its air carried a low hum of power from the giant reactors deep beneath the ground. Eli stood at the window of his quarters, his reflection dim in the glass, his gaze fixed far away, as if looking beyond the towers into the black between the stars. Vor sat at the desk nearby, scrolling through old data on a private console. The coordinates from the old explorer kept flashing in his mind, calling to him like a voice in the dark. He knew that somewhere out there lay the answer to the question no one dared to ask out loud: what had shaped humans into what they were. The council meeting the next day was different. The air in the chamber was thick with something unsaid. More guards than before lined the walls, their weapons held low, but ready. Members spoke in careful tones, glancing at each other. Before every word, the high speaker announced that the council archives had been searched for records on pre-contact Earth history, but access to certain files had been restricted under ancient security codes. No one in the chamber claimed to have placed those locks, and yet the locks remained. The speaker then declared that further study of human biology would be moved to a secure facility away from public view. Vor felt the weight of that decision. It was not just about science anymore. This was control, the kind that came before the rewriting of history. Eli heard the words without reaction, his face calm, his eyes unreadable. But Vor saw his hands tighten slightly at his sides, as if bracing for something heavier. The order meant that the tests and studies could now be done without oversight, far from the eyes of the galaxy. It meant that whatever the council feared or wanted, they could pursue it in secret. That night, Vor made a choice. He would find the source of those coordinates and learn what lay hidden there, even if it meant breaking council law. He opened an encrypted channel to an old contact, a data smuggler, who dealt in forbidden star maps. The reply came in minutes. The contact had heard of the coordinates and warned that others had searched for them too, and none had returned alive. This only made Vor more certain that the answer was worth the risk. He began to plan a way out of the capital. Meanwhile, the whispers about humans had grown sharper. Some called them a miracle of nature, others a mistake. Some began to suggest that humans were not a natural species at all, but the product of something older and far more dangerous. Such talk spread fast among crews on deep space runs, and in shadow markets. It was there, in the smoky corners of those places, that Vor's contact confirmed an old legend. The coordinates matched a system long abandoned, marked in old charts as a red zone. The legend claimed it was once home to a civilization that vanished before most current species had learned to use fire, and that this civilization had experimented with creating life forms to survive in any world, any condition, any war. Vor did not tell Eli everything at once, but the humans seemed to sense that something was moving beneath the surface as they prepared for the transfer to the new secure facility. Vor whispered that there might be a way to reach the coordinates. Eli studied him for a long moment, and then nodded, as if the decision had already been made before the words were spoken. The transfer itself was done under heavy guard, a silent convoy of armored craft gliding through the night sky between towers, the streets below empty. Except for a few curious faces at windows, Eli sat between two guards, his wrists bound, not in chains, but in sleek metal cuffs that monitored every vital sign. Drac Vor sat opposite, pretending to review medical data, while in truth he watched the route and timed every turn the convoy reached the edge of the city where the towers gave way to the dark plains, and there in a sudden burst of light and sound their chance came. A blast lit the night, a transport ahead veered sharply, and the convoy broke formation. Alarms echoed as security forces scrambled in the confusion. Drac Vor triggered a small device hidden in his sleeve. The cuffs on Eli snapped open without a sound. Together, they slipped out through a maintenance hatch and into the shadows. The chaos behind them grew louder, but they moved fast across the plains toward a low ridge where an old cargo skimmer waited, courtesy of Drac Vor's contact. The skimmer roared to life, and they vanished into the black. They traveled for hours under the pale glow of the system's moons, the capital a distant glow behind them. Drac Vor explained that their destination lay far beyond the usual trade lanes in a sector avoided by most travelers. Eli listened in silence, his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The skimmer brought them to a hidden dock where a small jump-capable ship waited, patched and old, but fast enough to outrun most patrol craft. They boarded quickly, Drac Vor setting the coordinates from memory. As the jump drive warmed, the ship's comm system crackled with warnings. The council had declared them fugitives wanted for theft of classified biological material. The phrasing made it sound as if Eli himself were nothing more than property. The anger in Drac Vor's chest burned hotter. He ignored the broadcasts and punched the jump key. The stars stretched and folded into darkness. When they emerged, the view before them was unlike anything Eli had seen, a system shrouded in drifting clouds of dust and light from a dying sun. Broken worlds hung in silence, their surfaces scarred and split. The coordinates led them to a small planet half buried in shadow, its atmosphere thin but breathable. The sensors showed ancient structures on the surface, silent for millennia. They descended slowly, the ship groaning as it pushed through turbulence. On the ground, they found a city made of black stone towers worn by time, but still standing. The streets were empty, save for wind that whispered through the cracks. Strange symbols carved into the walls pulsed faintly, as if reacting to their presence. Deep in the central hall, they found what looked like a vast archive, rows of dark glass panels, each glowing faintly at their touch. The language was old, yet the systems still lived. As Drac Vor worked the controls, the panels began to show images, great ships moving between stars, creatures being shaped in vast tanks, worlds being seeded with life, and among those images were humans, or something like them, being altered, adapted, given traits for survival, in fire and ice, in vacuum. The truth sank, and these were not myths. Humans had been made here by hands older than the Council, older than any current power. They were a creation of war, a living tool, designed to outlast every enemy and every world. Eli stood in silence as the panels showed battlefields where humans fought alongside other creations. The other species were gone now, yet the humans remained. The records ended abruptly, as if cut off by disaster. But the meaning was clear. The galaxy feared humans because somewhere deep it remembered what they were made to do. Drac Vor turned from the panels, knowing that if the Council learned the full truth, they would never allow humans to walk free, and if other powers learned at war, would follow the kind of war the galaxy had not seen in ages. He looked at Eli and saw no fear, only quiet understanding. The human stepped forward and placed a hand on the ancient stone, as if claiming it. The air in the ancient hall felt heavy, as if the stone itself carried the memory of everything that had been built and lost. Drac Vor could hear the faint hum of hidden systems still alive after countless ages. Eli kept his hand on the wall, his eyes half closed, as if listening to something beyond sound. The images on the black panels still glowed, showing the birth of humans from the design of an ancient race that had vanished without a name. The truth sat between them like a living thing, dangerous and impossible to ignore. A sudden tremor shook the ground, dust falling from the high arches above. Drac Vor checked his scanner and saw multiple ships entering the system. Their signatures matched Council intercept craft. They had been tracked or betrayed. Either way, the time they had left was short, he turned to Eli and said they must decide what to do with the data the archive could be copied, but its systems were tied to this world. If the council took control, they could erase the truth or use it for their own power. Eli moved to the center of the hall, his steps slow and steady, his gaze scanning the symbols carved into the floor. The lines formed a map of stars, each point marked with a faint light, some pulsing brighter than others. Drakvar realized with a chill that these were worlds seeded with other creations like humans, maybe still sleeping, maybe already part of the galaxy. In secret, the knowledge here was not only about the past, it was about a network of worlds shaped by the same ancient hand. The rumble grew louder, the walls shivering under the distant roar of engines landing in the ruins outside. Drakvar saw dust swirling through the broken doorways as the first council soldiers advanced in heavy armor, weapons ready. He knew they would not fire unless forced. They wanted Eli alive, but they would not hesitate to kill him if they had to. Eli stepped toward the archive controls, his fingers hovering above the glowing surface. Drakvar asked what he planned, but the human only looked at him and said that some truths could not be given to those who would chain them. The panels flickered under Eli's touch, lines of light racing across the floor and up the walls. The symbols on the stone began to shift, their shapes changing like water under the sun. The hum grew into a deep vibration that echoed through the entire hall. Drakvar realized Eli was activating something buried deep in the city, perhaps deeper than the city itself. The ground shook again, harder this time, cracks splitting the floor as a column of light burst upward through the center of the hall and into the sky like a signal to the entire system. Outside, the soldiers hesitated, their helmets turning toward the beam above their heads. The sky seemed to bend around the light clouds, spiraling away from it. The beam carried with it a sound low and resonant that seemed to press into every mind in range. Drakvar felt it not as a noise, but as a memory of heat and battle and the sharp edge of survival. He understood then that this was not just a signal, it was a call, one that the ancient makers had built into their creations, a way to awaken them if they ever slept. Eli stood in the center of the beam, his outline sharp against the light, his eyes bright with a fierce resolve. He told Drakvar to leave now, while the soldiers were still frozen in confusion, but Drakvar shook his head, saying that leaving now would mean abandoning him. Eli said that he had no intention of staying, but that the signal had to be sent long enough to reach every point on the star map before it could be shut down. Drakvar understood and began preparing their ship for a rapid escape. The soldiers began to move again, their commander shouting orders to surround the hall. Heavy footsteps pounded closer, the sound bouncing off the stone walls. Drakvar kept one eye on the entrance while watching the beam on his scanner. Its pulse was spreading across the system and beyond, carried by ancient relay stations that still obeyed their creators. Eli's face was calm, but his body tense like someone holding back a flood. When the final pulse left the beam, he cut the signal, and the light collapsed into the floor with a blinding flash. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then the soldiers charged into the hall, but Eli and Drakvar were already moving, slipping through a side passage that wound down into the lower levels of the ruins. The air there was colder, the walls slick with moisture from ancient condensation. They ran until the sound of pursuit faded, replaced by the low hum of the dock, where their ship waited hidden beneath a collapsed tower. They climbed aboard as the engines roared to life, lifting them into the sky. From above, they could see the soldiers still swarming through the ruins, some firing into the shadows as if the beam might rise again. But the light was gone, the signal had been sent, and somewhere in the dark between stars, other eyes were opening, other minds were remembering what they had been made for. Drakvar did not know if that was good or bad, only that it could not be undone. The ship cleared the thin atmosphere, the black of space stretching out before them. Behind them, the council fleet still held position above the planet, but small craft were already breaking away to give chase. Drakvar pushed the engines to their limit, the stars stretching into lines. As the jump drive engaged, Eli sat in the co-pilot seat silent for a long time before saying that the galaxy would soon change whether it wanted to or not. Drakvar asked if the awakening would bring allies or enemies. Eli only said that humans had been made to survive and that others like them would carry that same fire. Some would join them, some would try to destroy them. The difference would be in how the truth was used. Drakvar thought of the council, of their fear and control, And to the ancient makers who had built life to fight their wars, he wondered if the makers had foreseen this moment or if it was all just another cycle repeating through time. The ship dropped out of jump in a quiet sector far from patrol routes. Stars glittered like shards of ice around them. Eli leaned back in his seat, his face unreadable. Drakvor asked what they should do next. Eli said they would need to find the other worlds on the map before the council did, because the first to reach them would decide their fate. Drakvor nodded, knowing that this was only the beginning of something vast and dangerous. In the dark silence of space, the two of them sat between the past and the future, the hum of the engines the only sound as their course took them deeper into the unknown. And far behind them, in the ruins of a dead world, the ancient archive lay quiet, its secrets already on their way to those who have been sleeping, waiting for the call to rise again.